Fixing America's public schools is the subject of an old debate, but it is more important than ever today, given the huge budget cuts for education across the country. On one side are those who see small classes as a key solution to improving our schools. That's the position that Leonie Haimson, a New York City public school parent and the executive director of the advocacy group Class Size Matters, takes. She joins us now from New York. The other side, Matthew Chingos, he's a research fellow at Harvard University's program on education policy and governance. He joins us via Skype from Puerto Rico. Leonie, let me start with you. Let's talk a little bit about why you strongly believe, having looked at this, that smaller class sizes are better for our students than larger class sizes, even though there have been studies that show the opposite.
Well, I think it's very clear. The Institute for Education Sciences, which is the research arm of the U.S. Department of Education, says that there are only 4 education reforms that have been proven to work with rigorous evidence, and class size reduction is one of them. Alan Kruger, professor at Princeton, who's also the former chief economist for the Labor Department and the Treasury Department, has shown that class size reduction not only narrows the achievement gap, but provides economic benefits that are twice the cost. Parents and teachers know this, and in surveys across the country, teachers say it's the #1 way that would improve their effectiveness. And common sense tells us as well. So I think the research, the stakeholders, the surveys, they all should tell us that class size is an important determinant of student success, and we should do nothing to increase class sizes if we really want students to learn and achieve.
Matthew Chingos, researcher at Harvard, you have found in your research otherwise. Tell me about the research you've done and what you learned from it.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I did a study of a large-scale class size reduction policy that was implemented in Florida. And what it did was it changed the state constitution to mandate smaller classes in grades K through 12. Now, while there is some pretty good evidence that smaller classes make a difference in the early grades, the evidence was a lot weaker in the later grades. So a lot of the grades I focused on were the middle school grades, so 4 to 8. And I found really no evidence that it made any difference in Florida. And one possible reason for that is it may be the case that it was better for some students, but because the state had to hire thousands and thousands of new teachers, they ended up hiring less effective teachers, so that offset some of the gains. So when you think about class size reduction, you have to think not just about the effects it has on when you have to hire a few more teachers, but if you want to do it across the board, you're going to have to hire a lot more teachers.
Leonie, let's talk about that. In the hierarchy of things that you would like to happen to create a better situation for public education in America, there are issues with teachers, there are issues with teacher training and evaluation, there are issues with class size and the condition of schools and the resources that they have. Are you of the view that class size is the most important thing? And based on what Matthew said, do you agree that it's more important in younger grades than it is, say, toward the end of high school?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that Jeremy Finn, a professor at SUNY Buffalo, has shown that some severe methodological flaws with Mr. Chingos' study. I don't want to go into detail about it. It's highly technical. But given that there are only a very few things we know absolutely work to improve student achievement, and given that one of the most critical problems on the horizon right now is the achievement gap between racial and economic groups, I think it's very appropriate that today, on the celebration of Martin Luther King's birthday, we should be having this discussion, because to this day, black students continue to suffer from much larger classes than the average student. We know it works to narrow the achievement gap. We know there are inequitable class size conditions across the country, especially for poor and minority kids. This is something where our first priority and our dollars should be going into investing in the classroom. Right now, states are spending billions of dollars on unproven programs like merit pay for teachers and increasing online learning. I can tell you in New York City, the Department of Education plans to spend $1 billion next year. $1 billion to expand online learning throughout the city. This is a huge mistake. That money should be going to programs we know work to improve opportunities for kids, like smaller classes where they can get actual individualized attention from a real-life teacher instead of sitting on a computer.
Matthew, what's your response to that?
Sure. I think Leonie made one great point in there, which is that there is some pretty good evidence that smaller classes make even more of a difference for disadvantaged kids and for minority kids than for more advantaged kids and non-minority kids. So I think one important thing to keep in mind is you really want to avoid a one-size-fits-all mentality. I think that's the mistake a lot of the states like Florida have made in trying to implement these class size reductions across the board. So what you want to think about is, can you focus the resources on where they have the biggest impact? The one problem with class size reduction is that's enormously expensive. You have to hire new teachers, build new classrooms, and so on and so forth. So once you mandate it across the board, you have to hire all these inexperienced new teachers and potentially less effective new teachers. Whereas if you just let schools and districts pursue these policies, they can pursue them in more targeted ways. For example, focusing in the kinds of communities where the research shows us reducing class size makes more of a difference. So that you have to really avoid that one-size-fits-all kind of mentality.
Matthew, is there a number? I guess, given what you've just said, you're not going to give me a number in terms of what the ideal class size is, because you're saying you don't want a one-size-fits-all. But do you have a number in your head?
Well, I'll tell you, the ideal class size in a world...
Hold on, Lean, I'll get to you in a second. Matthew, go ahead.
Sure. I mean, the ideal class size in a world with unlimited money is 1, right? It's always easiest to learn when you're by yourself.
No,
so there's no doubt that in theory, it's better to have fewer kids per teacher. The problem is it's so, we know we can't afford to have only 1 kid per class. So the question is, where do we balance the trade-off between having fewer kids per teacher and having to hire more teachers, and having to spend enormous amounts of money to do that? And keep in mind, I'm not saying we should spend less money on education. I'm saying those resources could be deployed in potentially more effective ways.
Okay, Leonie, I only have a little bit of time. Tell me what you think the ideal size is.
Well, I can tell you that the people making education policy for this country now, people like Bill Gates and Mayor Bloomberg, send their kids to private schools where no class sizes are larger than 15. And yet in the large urban districts, class sizes are often 30 or more. It is highly inequitable, and it is highly hypocritical of these same men to be favoring increases in class sizes in our large urban school districts, where class sizes are going up every day and money is being wasted in lots of ways where there's no research backing and there's no support for it among stakeholder groups. So I'd say let's reduce class sizes first in the neediest schools. But to the contrary, those are the places where class sizes are going up the most. I can tell you in Detroit, they're proposing to increase class sizes to 60 in the schools where our poorest students attend. This is a huge inequitable situation. It's getting worse. And on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, we should not allow this to happen.